Hey everyone, it's Steven. Today I have the 2021 Porsche Cayman S. I've been so looking forward to driving this car for a really long time now. I'm in Denver, Colorado here for a fun Labor Day weekend trip, doing some fun canyon carving with obviously a really legendary car here. This is my first time ever driving a mid-engine car, so I was really excited to get the opportunity to rent this from Devon on Turo. If you want to check out the exact link, it'll be in the description below. But otherwise, just kind of jumping right into things here. The Porsche Cayman is kind of the twin of the Porsche Boxster. The Boxster is the convertible top, whereas the Cayman, you'll notice, is only a hard top and actually does not have a convertible option, so it's the coupe style. This is Porsche's entry-level roadster, so not the 911, obviously the one that everyone aims for, the kind of supercar, but this really is almost as good as some of the supercars that you'll ever use, like, you know, even comparing it to something like the C8 Corvette, very similar driving dynamics there. And obviously, being a mid-engine car, you get some really interesting quirks here. So you have a frunk and a trunk, which makes it a bit more practical than you would expect normally, right? Some other sports cars in this segment, like the Z4 that I reviewed, right? You've only got a trunk and it's not gonna have that much space here. However, you do have a frunk here with 5.7 cubic feet of space and a trunk that also has 9.7 cubic feet of space. So you actually have a decent amount, and you could actually kind of daily drive this if you really want to. This is the fourth generation of the Porsche Cayman / Boxster family. It is designated the 718. This actually came out in the 2016 model year, so you can imagine this is 5 years into the model years, and the 2022 is actually about the same thing. I believe I've read that Porsche is going to be redesigning this for the 2023 model year, which it is in dire need of a refresh on the interior. The base Porsche Cayman MSRP's at just below $60,000, which is pretty high for this segment, right? You have something like the Z4 that MSRP is closer to the $50,000 mark, the Supra, all those other roadsters, then you have, of course, the Miata, which is a lot cheaper than that. But obviously you're getting a Porsche, right? So what do you expect? MSRP is for just about $60,000. The trim I have here is the S, which has a larger engine, and that comes just above $72,000. Obviously though, with options, if you're familiar with how Porsche kind of does their stuff, you'll know that there are plentiful options here, and the actual MSRP of this one loaded up is over $100,000 for the sticker price, which is kind of absurd for, as you'll see when I show you the interior quality. The main difference that comes with the trim levels here is that the Cayman S trim here comes with a larger engine. The 2.5 liter Turbo 4 produces 350 horsepower and 309 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers aren't crazy, but when you hear the sounds that this car makes and kind of just the overall driving dynamics, you really understand the legend of the Porsche sports car. This engine will take you from 0 to 60 in 4.4 seconds. Again, not the fastest in the class. The Supra 3.0 was much faster at 3.8 seconds for a 0 to 60 sprint. This is all mated to a standard 6-speed manual transmission. The one I have here is actually the automatic PDK, which is Porsche's dual clutch transmission. That is a 7-speed and is actually a $3,000 upcharge, which is kind of interesting. So Porsche definitely wants to save the manuals here. And for those of you wondering about the fuel efficiency of this car, it's actually quite good. You've got 19 city and 25 highway miles per gallon. Jumping right into the exterior here, you've got Porsche's classic design here. Honestly, they really haven't changed up their design in the past, like, you know, decade, but I still think it looks just as good as before. This is in the jet black metallic color, which is an upcharge. Porsche has tons of different colors if you look at their website. But this one is actually a really gorgeous color in the right lighting, but I will say it is a fingerprint magnet, so you might want to be careful when you're considering a black color like this. Here, moving on to the headlights, you have some gorgeous Porsche headlights here, and they have really refined these over the years, and I think this is a big thing that they've refreshed over time, and it looks really gorgeous. You have full LEDs for daytime running lights and for your normal headlights as well. And you've also got a windshield washer for your headlights, which is obviously a luxury touch that only comes with cars like the Porsche, of course. The front fascia in general looks pretty aggressive, but, you know, nothing too crazy. You do have a lot of fully functional vents, which people will be very happy about. For example, right here in the lower fascia, you do have fully functional actual air vents. Kind of moving along to the side of the car, the body lines here are very typical. You know, people have come to love and expect the kind of Porsche body lines you have here. You'll notice that these wheels are really big, really gorgeous. Upgraded 20-inch Carrera S wheels. This is probably my favorite part of this car. Look at those gorgeous brake calipers and the satin finish. It just looks incredible. I think every single time I see this car, the first thing I see is the large wheels that really fill up the wheel well and how gorgeous that color is. It really pops, especially in the daylights. Kind of moving on to the side, you have these functional air vents on the side as well, which definitely gives this a more aggressive appearance, kind of like shark fins or something, you know? And I really, really like the appearance of that. I think it enhances, you know, kind of the sporty styling, and you know that you're in a true sports car when you have something like that. Moving on to the rear of this gorgeous vehicle, you have Porsche's typical design language back here. Hasn't really changed too much over the years. I am really missing that full LED light bar that goes across. That is in the Macan, the Cayenne, and the 911. I'm really hoping they bring it to the Cayman and Boxster twins after the 2023 redesign. Kind of moving along, you do have a rear spoiler. It looks really good, and it does lift off at speeds above 45 miles per hour. Otherwise, you've got some typical badging here, which you can obviously edit, delete, black out. You can do anything you really want with a Porsche, as long as you pay for it. And then kind of moving on to the bottom here, you do have a twin exhaust tips here, and they sound really, really good. Let's give it a listen. Sounds incredible, right? That is music to my ears. So kind of moving on, before we go into the interior, I did want to show you guys what the trunk and frunk look like. So moving on into the trunk here, very, very hot right now. It is really, really hot in Denver. You actually have a decent amount of space here. You've almost got about 10 cubic feet of space. You can see fits a few bags, a laptop case, and some other stuff, and you can definitely put things over here as well. So actually is relatively practical. And at the front of the car here, you have the frunk. This has about 5 cubic feet of space, but is actually pretty deep, so you can fit some pretty large suitcases like the one I have here. Moving on into the interior of this gorgeous car, you can see that from a quick glance, this really does not look like a $100,000 vehicle in my opinion, aside from obviously the Porsche badging here. So getting in, obviously not the easiest thing to do if you've ever been in a roadster. Definitely kind of hurts every single time you get in. I do like that it says the Cayman S there. They want you to know that you're not just in the base Cayman, you're in the Cayman S. You have a 7-inch infotainment screen here, which looks really painfully small, honestly. And otherwise, the rest of the cabin is pretty refined. You know, something you'd expect to see maybe in like a, you know, a luxury car, but I still feel like I'm disappointed in the amount of plastic in this $100,000 vehicle, right? You don't have leather, and you can definitely get leather here, but you just have soft touch plastic instead. The door handles and the door in general feel really solid, and I think the build quality is a huge thing that you'll find in Porsches, is that the build quality is very superb, right? They do a really good job with that. Obviously, they're using high quality materials and stuff like that, but it still feels like, you know, not having leather at upholstery and stuff like that is just, it feels like a ripoff, honestly. You do have a Bose speaker system here. This car does not have the upgraded Burmeisters, which are really, really nice. And you also have some interesting storage spots, like right here for water bottles and anything else you'll need, because obviously there is not much other storage in this vehicle. Now that the car is on, you can kind of see what the 7-inch infotainment screen looks like. It's really not the greatest, but we'll go into that more in the tech portion of this review. I did want to show you guys, speaking of water bottles, how you actually have some cup holders. Pretty unique design, and I really like how Porsche integrated that into you know, the actual cabin itself. Obviously you can't fit water bottle holders and stuff like that here, so you put them inside of the dash, which is a really unique place. Overall though, I think my biggest issue is that I just expected more creature comforts in a car at this price point, right? Something like embroidered headrests, you know, I don't know if that's just asking for too much, right? And I know that's available in a package, another $500, $1,000, you know, whatever Porsche nickel and diamonds you for. But you know, overall, I just feel like more things should come standard in this vehicle. And unfortunately though, you know, when you're buying a Porsche, you know that that's not what's going to happen. So, you know, it's kind of like you know that you're going to have to end up paying extra for those packages to make the car exactly how you want it to be. The steering wheel, very comfortable. I think the Volkswagen Group does the best job with the steering wheels, right? Their Audi steering wheel is fantastic. The Porsche one is very well bolstered. You feel like you're in command, and it really helps accentuate those really great driving dynamics of this car. Otherwise, the steering wheel looks gorgeous, right? The build quality is superb. Nothing feels rickety or anything like that, right? Like every button has a great practical place, and you know, some people don't love all of the hard buttons, but honestly, they feel and react just the way you want. Ultimately, I think that's the biggest thing. It's like this interior gives me such mixed feelings because I love how practical everything is, and even though it looks kind of old-fashioned, right, like with this like cassette tape thing here, all of these hard buttons are so easy to use and intuitive, and I think people will really like that. And you know, the rows of buttons here are kind of weird. At least it's not as plentiful as the ones in the Cayenne and the Macan, but you know, I do think ultimately replacing some of these with screens and stuff like that could help, but I honestly think that the buttons in this car feel so good. Every single time you're using the steering wheel buttons and stuff like that, everything feels perfect. You know exactly what's happening, you know the response, and it just ultimately is a great finish on the car. You do have some paddle shifters mounted on the steering wheel, which look really good, feel very solid, and are really easy to use. And I did want to point out the heated steering wheel control, which is this button that you cannot even see as a driver. You kind of just have to feel for it, and then it turns on the heated steering wheel. Before we move on to the tech, I did want to talk about the seats a little bit. So I've been doing a lot of driving in the Denver, Colorado area, you know, going into the mountains and all that sort of stuff. And these seats have kept me pretty comfortable. They are ventilated and heated, which is really nice. Obviously that's a package, but it is a really nice feature of this $100,000 vehicle that, you know, obviously should be expected at this price point. You can see all of my recording equipment here, but the seats are pretty well bolstered. You know, the sides obviously feel very racy. They're pretty tough, I will say. And these are not the Sport Seat Plus, so those are actually fancier and feel a little more plush and have some more features there. But otherwise, this one is just going to be your standard sport seats here, and they feel good, but nothing really to write home about. Unfortunately, the tech is really where this car falls short. So obviously, you're not buying a Porsche for the tech, right? So ultimately, it's really not that important in the grand scheme of things, right? I'll talk more about the driving experience and everything like that in the driving impressions portion of this, but obviously, you know, if you are curious about the tech, it's really not what you would expect for a $100,000 vehicle. I will say the infotainment system itself is very quick to respond. So all of these buttons, super responsive and very easy to use. Everything is intuitive, and I really like it. And you know, like you have these hard buttons here, like, you know, like I said before, that allow you to go through things like Apple CarPlay and all that sort of stuff in your settings, your sound settings. You've got some special Bose settings here as well. I will mention that the Bose speaker system is pretty good, but definitely not as good as the high-end Burmeister, which costs an additional whopping $4,000 for that package. But moving on from the infotainment screen, it is responsive, and I really do like it. It's interesting, right? Because you have some much fancier looking screens out there and, you know, systems in general, but they're not as responsive as this. So I will say that the new and improved, you know, 10-inch screens that come in the Macan and Cayenne, those are very impressive, and I really hope that hits the Boxster and Cayman as soon as well. The gauge cluster here is, you know, Porsche is never going to go fully digital except for in the Taycan or something like that, right? But I know for this, they're definitely going to stick with the analog gauges. They want you to feel like you're in a normal traditional sports car, which is totally fine. This gauge cluster is the configurable one. You can choose different things here, and it is fast. It looks good. The resolution is great, very easy to see and read, and ultimately that does look good. I do like that you have a digital speedometer there as well, and you do have some digital displays to show you things like your odometer, you know, the temperature outside, a whopping 102 degrees, and the time and all that sort of stuff. So ultimately, the main gripes I have with the tech are the small infotainment screen and the fact that the infotainment system looks very dated at this point, but also just the fact that so much of it comes in packages, right? I don't have the Sport Chrono package, which is unfortunate because it is a huge thing. You get this cool little analog sport clock here, and you've also got this little addition on the steering wheel, which allows you to do things like launch control, Sport Plus mode. Unfortunately, I only get Sport mode here. So it is a little unfortunate that, you know, everything comes in packages, but when you're buying a Porsche, you can design it truthfully to be exactly how you want it to be, and I think that's the kind of the ultimate reason people love Porsches. And another issue I have with this car is the unfortunately low-res rear-view camera here. You have a $100,000 vehicle, and the camera quality looks like something out of a 2020 Camry or something like that. Definitely not what you expect for a Porsche. Finally, I did want to show you what Apple CarPlay looks like in the Cayman. CarPlay is finally included as a standard feature in the 2021 model year, but it just doesn't look too good on the 7-inch screen. You can't see much of the map, and the screen just looks cramped. However, it is very responsive and easy to use, just like all the other controls in this car. Alright, so obviously I said a lot of bad things about the car in terms of the interior quality and the tech, right? It's just not as impressive as I thought it would be for a $100,000 vehicle, but then you start driving this car and you understand. It's so different from any other car I've driven before. The mid-engine roar it fills the cabin, and it's not that weird artificial roar that is, you know, piped in through the speakers like a lot of cars have these days. It just sounds so good And you know, there are some obviously you know, negative parts of it though, right? The road noise is definitely not a good thing in this car. Even when you're on pretty smooth roads, it just is loud, and I think that just kind of happens when you're driving a car that is so low to the ground and also so small. I will say though, the cabin, you know, the wind noise and that sort of stuff is actually not that loud. When you're going at lower speeds, you definitely feel like you're in a luxurious vehicle, right? It's pretty quiet in general, and you don't feel like it's too loud or anything. It's just really when you start going on freeways and stuff like that, you might get a sense that it's a little louder than you want if you're trying to have a conversation with someone. Obviously though, first and foremost, this car is meant for driving, right? You really just want to feel how fun it is to drive such a legendary car, and the handling dynamics, it is just incredible. Nothing like I've driven before, right? You're going through canyon roads, and it blows me away. I can't even explain in words how easy it is to weave through roads, and you feel like you're in control the whole time. The car is responsive, the steering is easy, it's not numb like so many of those vehicles have these days, where they're very assisted with all of those different features, like, you know, in BMWs and everything. They call themselves the ultimate driving machine, but really that is Porsche's title. Ultimately, this has been incredible to drive. I am so happy I finally got the chance to experience the legend of the Porsche mid-engine car here. So I really recommend everyone try this out if they're looking for a sporty roadster, right? There's a reason that this has been, you know, consistently such an iconic and timeless car. The design, you know, Porsche doesn't even have to change it up that much. People just love, like, the idea of the Porsche, right? And I think that's like a really cool niche that Porsche fills there. My personal biggest gripe with this vehicle is, I just have to say it, it's the packaging, right? It's the nickel and diming from Porsche, and they know they can get away with it. And, you know, I understand that people are still going to keep buying this, even though, you know, it can get really crazy with the amount of packages, right? Think about a BMW or Mercedes or Audi. You can get, for $20,000 more, which is pretty much the standard upcharge for a Porsche, you can get a higher trim, you can get some from, you know, Mercedes base model to an AMG, and it's just kind of crazy that Porsche forces you to put all these packages in your car. And I think, you know, the way they get away with it is by saying that you're able to customize your car exactly the way you want, which is really cool, ultimately, right? Almost no two Porsches are ever the same, which gives the brand a lot of, you know, exclusivity, which is obviously what people want when you have something like a Porsche. But yeah, so I think that's ultimately the one gripe I have with it, right? The tech, everything else I can kind of get over, but it's the fact that in order to get exactly what you want, you're going to have to spend a lot of money. And I think that really pushes away a lot of buyers and forces them to go for brands like, you know, Mercedes, Audi, the other competitors. But overall, that's really all I wanted to talk about today. Like I said, this has been a dream to drive. I've been super happy with this in Denver. Really gorgeous city here. But yeah, I will talk to you guys in the next video. Thanks everyone for watching. If you want to look at some of my other videos, you can check them out here. And please subscribe down here. Thanks everyone.